if you Google self-care, you would have 3 billion results. I've been a counselor for 10 years, and a lot of those are just noise. It leaves us with this twisted concept of what we need is a picture-perfect distraction away from our lives so we can get back to work. All it does for me is leave me more stressed, more broke, and less well-adjusted. Just like how I didn't find peace when I purged my closets during quarantine. And instead, I found myself ordering socks with my grocery pickup because I didn't have time or energy to do the laundry. And yes, as a counselor and counselor educator, I need to be an expert in self-care. But most counselors and educators don't look like me. As a Latina, as a woman of color, these self-care tips weren't made for me. They were simply dictated to me. And they're everywhere. I know y'all have seen them. And then ever since the pandemic started, there's been this surge of webinars and articles and this rush to implement wellness into every workspace. It's exhausting. And after months and months of racial injustices being pulled out of the movements and into the media, and the effects of the pandemic just wore on, I started to feel it too. I was tired of trying to juggle and balance all the things. And then I started scolding myself. I'm a counselor. Where is my self-care? This is my fault that I'm stressed and unproductive at work. This is my fault that I'm this soggy, tearful mess. And then I thought, well, great. This self-care business is just one more thing that I'm not getting right. So what does this good counselor do? I start looking at all those 3 billion results to try to improve my self-care. I start taking notes in these webinars. But I'd done all that. So then the researcher in me takes over because something's not right here. And then there's the confirmation. Self-care is not made for me. This self-care is made and marketed to help us feel better so we can get back to work. That's not self-care. That's job care. And I'm more than my job. Yes, my work is hard sometimes, even when I love it. But I'm not just a counselor. Just like you are not just whatever your roles are. We are much more than work. Self-care is not this new wellness or counseling construct. Self-care was born out of the Black liberation movement in the 60s and 70s. When Audre Lorde spoke of self-care, it was an act of political warfare. It was a space to rest and heal so we could come back and continue fighting systemic anti-Black racism, social injustices. When Angela Davis and her peers spoke of self-care, it was an encouragement to change the world, support your communities and your families. Over the decades, self-care has been stripped of the power behind it and co-opted into this whitewashed billion-dollar industry full of luxury moisturizers and able-bodied experiences in spaces where marginalized people just don't fit in. And who's teaching all this self-care? If you didn't know, almost all of the foundational training that anybody who's a counselor would have had was written and made on theories developed by old and now dead white men. And a little over 70% of all of the professors teaching new counselors are white too, in a field that doesn't look like me. Of course this self-care is not for me. In all my research and counseling sessions, I found that the 2 things that are missing the most that we could add back into self-care are community and culture. No matter how you identify, Hispanic, Black, Indigenous, queer, trans, there's so many different ways to lean into your culture. Because when Kimberly Crenshaw spoke of intersectionality, she spoke of all of these aspects, all of these pieces of our lives, which self-care just ignores. The beauty of things like music and art and jewelry, tradition, spirituality, they just throw it away. And yes, there are white people with intersectionalities whose self-care just dismisses as well. So we're missing the culture and the community. Within every community, within every culture, there's a community. Or you found a community that welcomed you, or your neighborhood is your community. And it's there that we can gather, learn, and grow. And this is community healing. Because in these communities, we fit in because people get us, because they are us. And this is what we missed the most during all of these challenges over the past months and months. Not the spa days. We missed our churches, our kids' play dates, handshakes, hugs, dating, receiving food from a neighbor when you needed it the most, or just lingering over a cup of coffee. That's the wellness that we find in community healing. We also need to add that we are individuals too. Because self-care ignores those pieces of individuals, the individual needs, the needs of people, like people of color, disabled people, trans people, queer people, the blue-collar worker, the caregiver who's doing it all alone, the single parent who can't afford to call in sick, the nurse who has worked her fourth 16-hour shift this week, or the new widow who's just learned and read that the best self-care is a date night. We deserve to be present in this world with all of our identities, to revel in our cultures, to lean into our communities, to be able to feel comfortable and to fit in all of our spaces, yes, even at work, and to be authentic wherever we are. And especially to explore self-care, how and where it would help us the best instead of being dictated to do these things. I'm not going to stand up here and tell you that I have all the answers or just one answer, because then you could just add me into those 3 billion results. This is an unlearning process, and it might be hard. What I can say is that once I unlearned all of that self-care, job care noise, and I was able to realize just how little healing I got from a time-consuming and expensive pedicure, then I was able to open up and understand that my best self-care is teaching my son how to cook, and that the only way, the best way, to flip a tortilla is with your bare hands. And so I leave you with the encouragement to go out into this world and to take back your self-care and to add in those pieces of culture and community that you might be missing, whatever that looks like for you. And no matter who you are, I wish and hope for you to have the space to rest and to heal. Thank you.